So climate change is often seen as an environmental issue, but I suppose what I want to highlight from a fairness perspective is that it's a social justice issue. The people who are going to suffer the worst effects from climate change have not emitted anything yet. They've not yet even been born. So I'm Eve Carnall. I'm co-founder of the Buzz Tour, which is a community-led grassroots organisation to pollinate change between different environmental causes. One of the things we need to think about is cumulative carbon emissions. So over the last 300 years, the UK has been a very significant carbon emitter. Now those carbon emissions and the carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for a number of decades before they're processed. And during that time, they're warming the atmosphere every year. So the people that are dying now from climate change are not the people that are primarily responsible for the emissions. They're not even in the countries that are primarily responsible for those emissions. But the key issue for me is that the real victims are not even born yet. So when we're talking about our duties and our obligations or our responsibilities from a social justice point of view, I think it's very important to remember cumulative emissions. So on a standard emissions graph, or a map showing per country emissions, you'll often see developing countries might have very large emissions. But from a fairness perspective, the key thing to think about is emissions per capita. So if you were to cut carbon emissions from somebody who is living in poverty, you are very likely risking their life. It's going to make life materially difficult for them. If you are cutting carbon emissions from somebody who has a great deal of luxury items, multiple cars, swimming pools, those sorts of things, you could massively cut their carbon emissions without affecting their quality of life or their chances of survival. So last year I walked 1,300 miles and I interviewed over 90 people about the wonderful range of work that they do. Now that could be from a divestment campaign where they are removing income from fossil fuel industries. It could be a permaculture project where they're looking at alternative agriculture. But really what I was searching for was everybody's different perspective. So you're looking at climate change as a big sphere of a problem, and we're all looking at different sides of it. And if we are to move forward as a movement together, we need to start connecting those things up. We need to value what other people are contributing. And from a perspective of horizontal hostility, what you sometimes get in movements is people arguing and sniping across within a movement rather than fighting up at hierarchy and up at power and really sort of fighting those oppressions. So what I'd like to celebrate is the diversity of our movement in terms of everyone who is working to leave a habitable planet for our children, I consider to be in the same movement. If you are for life, then I am for you. So if you want to find out more about any of the projects that I interviewed, you can look at it at www.buzztour.org. And in a few weeks' time, you can also have a look at the film, the documentary that we made, and buy the book.